Welcome to the OVW podcast, the unofficial podcast of Ohio Valley Wrestling. My name is Jack Minokes.
I'm Brian Hines.
It's a Thursday in the feed. You know what that means. We are sitting down with another OVW superstar, this time in the form of Anthony Toatele, the Flowin' Samoan. Anthony, how are you?
I'm good. I appreciate you guys having me on. I'm very excited to be here.
Thanks for joining us, man.
Yes, thank you so much.
You will be our first interview that we've ever done on Zoom, so thank you for being our guinea pig this afternoon on the OVW podcast.
That's why I'm here.
Anthony, let's start broad, man. Let's start really broad. How long have you been wrestling?
I believe, if my math is correct, I've been wrestling for 11 years and some change.
Okay.
This year.
So so 11 years, so we're looking at 2014, 2013?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I debuted, my very first match was at the end, like November 2013. That was my first match ever.
Where?
It was at a little place in Shelbyville, Indiana called New Era Wrestling. And I was in like a 6-man tag match and got my ass whooped. And that was my introduction to the business.
That's a story that we've heard a couple of times before.
Yeah, that sounds very familiar.
What was your relationship with wrestling before you started wrestling?
Man, I have been a wrestling fan my entire life. So I grew up watching wrestling with my dad. It was something that I did with him every Monday night. We would sit down and watch either WCW Nitro or Raw. Even as I got older and moved out, and obviously you never see eye to eye with your father as you become a teenager, right? But I would always do that.
Yeah.
And so as I continued into my sports career, which I ended up playing football, indoor football, like arena football.
Oh, right on.
As I got towards the end of that, I was really trying to figure out what was next for me in my life. And so after that, I was like, well, me and my friend were talking. And he said, why don't we try wrestling? Let's give wrestling a shot. And I was like, well, that seems natural. Like The Rock did that. So I ended up finding a school and signing up for training.
So about how old were you?
I was late to the game. So I was 23, I believe, 23 when I first started training.
And it's so funny, wrestling is one of the only worlds where you say 23 is late to the game.
I've got one.
Oh, yeah.
That I want to ask.
Yeah.
So you got into the game late. You're watching on Monday nights with your dad when you're little. Who do you watch for? And, as far as because I'm the same way. When I was little, I had obviously Hulk Hogan and Junkyard Dog. And obviously Andre the Giant was, just pretty much everybody's favorite. Who were your favorites?
So I was a huge Sting fan.
Nice.
Even before the Crow Sting. So my grandma, when she was alive, she loved to tell everybody the story that her big, tough Samoan grandson would sneak into her makeup when he was 3 or 4, get blue eyeshadow and just put it all over my face and then run around the house telling everybody that was Sting. So Sting was a one.
Sure.
And then obviously The Rock. The Rock being Samoan, really the first person for me as a fellow Samoan to see someone being successful. And then as I continued my sporting career through middle school and high school, guys like Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar. I did a little bit of amateur wrestling as well.
Did you do amateur? Yeah, it's when Kurt and Brock are kind of the guys you're looking at, you must have been an amateur guy.
Yeah.
That's so funny that Sting, a lot of people, especially grew up in the 90s, whatever, Sting is just that black and white face paint. For you, you're a little Stinger from way back.
Oh man, my dad had a blonde flat top. And so I used to think that my dad and Sting were best friends. They must have been because they had the same haircut.
They'd clearly go to the same person. Yeah.
Yeah. They go to the same barber, right?
So you're Samoan, and in wrestling, that seems like it could be tough because you're automatically kind of getting compared to some of the very greats of the business. Have you ever run into any kind of pushback from that? People wanted to put you in a box you weren't necessarily comfortable being in?
100%. So when I first started, I won't name any names, but there was this idea of who Anthony Toatele should be, and it was a guy with a lei and a grass skirt. And at the time, I was like, "That's not me, right?" I wanted to be so far away from that stuff when I first started because I didn't want to be put in a box.
Sure.
To your point. And then as time has progressed and we've kind of evolved, the business has evolved. I'm more apt, and I have kids now too, so I'm more apt to show my culture through my character in wrestling. And for my family, it's a representation of my family, not just my my ethnic background, but my family as well.
Sure. I could just imagine, because we've talked to other people that, for a long time, the wrestling business did kind of have a weird relationship with how we portrayed people from different backgrounds. And thankfully, we're kind of moved past that. I love that you kind of touched on, as you've gotten older, you're more in touch, or, more proud, or not, I don't want to say more proud, more willing to show that side of yourself. And especially that you have kids. How old are your children?
So I have a 15-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old.
I got to ask.
So they're kind of all over the place.
Are you and the 15-year-old seeing eye to eye?
Actually, my 15-year-old, I had her when I was fairly young.
Okay.
So we've kind of grown up together. So she was with me at the start of my wrestling journey. She was the first time that I ever stepped in the ring. It wasn't much later that it was the first time she ever, stepped into a ring. So she's been around wrestling almost her entire childhood. So far, we're doing okay. She is a little upset that after high school, I am one of the coolest parents, and all of her friends ask about me. So,
well, I mean,
yeah,
it's a little embarrassing, I'm sure, but
she'll appreciate that one day. I'm sure. She'll appreciate that.
Good memories.
Does she have any intention of getting into the wrestling ring?
I think anything wrestling wise has been squashed just because of how much she's been around it.
Sure.
But again, who knows? She's definitely not my athlete. She's more of an intellectual. She loves to read. And she's creative and very social. But we'll see. I'm always curious. The only reason I was going to ask is, like, especially at 15, their whole life's ahead of them. Would you want them to be in the wrestling business? That's a good question. I feel like everyone that has kids always gets that question. Pro wrestlers, part of me would say yes. Like, it's been this awesome journey for me thus far. But obviously there's negatives, there's cons to that too. And I would hate for my kid to go through some of the things that I've gone through or have been a witness to.
Sure.
But the highs are just so cool. Like being able to perform in front of a large crowd and getting in the ring with guys that you grew up with, watching on television. Like I can't argue with that.
No. So you start about 2013, late 2013. When's kind of stuff start making sense to you in terms of like, oh, I can make a living doing this, or like, here's how this network works, or here's how this lifestyle works? Like, was there a point where you remember kind of the light bulb going off?
Yeah, it was about, I would say, 2015, 2016 is when I really started to like hit my stride as far as wrestling is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting a lot of attention from promoters. People were reaching out to me. I had taken on a manager, if you will, and I don't know if you guys know who Karn Alexander is. He's an OVW student, currently a trainee, and he's been around the business for a little bit. But his sister, who was managing me at the time, he was leaving the business, so she got with me. That's my wife now.
Okay.
So we just got together. We got together, and that's when we got together, it really took off. Like, we were all over the place, all over the Midwest, traveling all over the place. So I would say probably like a year, 2 years in is when I really started hitting my stride.
So how often, or how soon after you guys met or started working together professionally did you guys end up getting married?
We dated, we got together and worked together for about almost 6 months to a year. And then we decided we'd give dating a try and have a working relationship. And then we dated for a year, and I was like, well, this is it. If anyone's going to understand me and the business and what it takes for me to be successful, it's going to be her.
That's beautiful.
Now, here we are 7 years later, going on 8 years now, with a little happy family.
That's beautiful, man.
That's fantastic.
So you're kind of stuff's gaining traction. You got a new manager. You're getting some momentum. You're all over the Midwest. You're getting bookings from everywhere. Is that around the time you come to Ohio Valley Wrestling for the first time, or when did you start coming to Ohio Valley Wrestling? Was that very recently?
So That's really recent.
Okay.
So I've obviously had heard of OVW and coming down to OVW. Amazing Maria had tried a couple times to get me to come down, and schedule just, really didn't work out. And thankfully now my schedule allows me to be a pretty semi-regular participant down there. And I've always been a fan of OVW. There's a lot of history behind that name. And now just saying, for me, getting to say I've been to the Davis Arena and been in that ring and walked those halls is pretty awesome for me.
That is. I mean, you said a couple of your favorite guys, Brock Lesnar, Shelton Benjamin's another, amateur style wrestler turned pro. I'm sure that there's guys like that a million of those guys that have come through there that you're looking at as like, oh, I could do that,
100%.
So you're kind of got brought into OVW through Amazing Maria.
Yeah, her and JMO. Maria and I have known each other through the indie circuit for quite some time. JMO and I we met a long time ago, and we recently just reconnected. And he was like, "Hey, man, like I would love to see you come down to OVW and see what you've got." And he sent me the invite, and I just showed up.
That's awesome. I'm assuming you mean Jamin Olivencia, right?
No.
Yes.
Jesse Morris.
Jesse
Morris. Oh, of course. Jesse Morris. I knew that. We just interviewed him a couple weeks ago, actually. He's a great guy. Yeah. Really glad to sit down with him. I knew that. I'm dumb. So JMO brings you in. Amazing Maria brings you in. You've been there a handful of times. What's your early understanding of Ohio Valley Wrestling?
Yeah, obviously I've been around the game for a little bit, and I understand that at OVW it's going to be about showing up, being consistent, and putting on great matches. My job at Ohio Valley Wrestling is to do just that, regardless of where I'm at, whether that be on Overdrive, whether it be on a dark match, whether it be on Rise. So I knew that going in, and so that's always going to be my goal, no matter where I'm being placed on the card. I really just want to go out there and steal the show and just show everybody, like, hey, man, while you may not know me, it has a household name, I've been around, and I'm pretty good at what I do.
Yes, you are. There's been a handful of guys, too, new faces, much like yourself, that have come into OVW so just like polished already and so smooth, and it's been a lot of fun to see a guy like you come into Ohio Valley Wrestling, especially with sometimes I love the academy students, but it's nice to see like a guy who's got 10 years fully formed, knows what he's going in there for. Whenever there's obviously like a ton of talent at Ohio Valley Wrestling behind the scenes that have been at the big time and have done things that most people could only dream of. So you're around that talent all the time. You're around those handful of dudes all the time, those handful of people all the time. Do you get much like feedback from them? Do you get whenever you're getting notes, let's call them, or whatever, from your match, who are you getting them from? Are you getting them from Doug Basham? Are you getting them from Al?
Oh, I'm going to both those guys.
Sure.
I immediately look to Basham. I always make sure that I try to go to Al at the end of every show, say, hey, is this what you were looking for? How do you think I did? And then guys like Cashflow. Like Cashflow is another guy that, give that man his flowers, because he's been around for a minute. And with the whole Netflix thing blowing up for him, and him really making a name for himself, utilizing that platform, like I went to him immediately. I was like, hey, Cash, did you see this? Like, what do you think about that? And thankfully he's nice enough he actually approached me. He was like, hey, I loved that you did this. So that's just, those guys always looking for feedback, because I may be 10, 11 years in, but there's still always room for growth and improvement.
Absolutely. And Cash, Cash has said to us before that, like, yeah, sometimes I learn stuff from the guys that have been doing it longer than me. Sometimes I learn stuff from the guys that have been doing it for 6 months. We all see things in a different way and for different reasons. In your short time at OVW, is there anything either in the mat or behind the scenes that's really stuck out to you? Just
how much work really goes into a live TV production. Like that is such an interesting thing for me that I've never been exposed to before.
Sure.
So hats off to the production team and all the people that we don't see, and they're behind the camera and they're in the production room and they're helping bring this vision to life. Like those guys don't get enough kudos, and they should, because there's a lot of work that goes in and week out to make sure that we as wrestlers and OVW superstars, if you will, that we look cool, we look good doing the thing that we love to do.
Over the course of like the last year or so, the production values have gone up dramatically, and especially in person at Hot Point Davis Arena. Just the lighting and how the shots are, and watching it in public at Davis, and then going home and seeing all the little elements that you don't get to see while you're there, like all of the like the backstage scenes and stuff like that that you don't ordinarily get when you're there. They've really done a phenomenal job of improving over the course of the last year, and you're absolutely right. They don't get nearly enough credit for what they do.
There was something that you had kind of touched on that now I'm kind of blanking on, unfortunately. Let me ask you this while I get back on track. I see something right behind your shoulder there. It says "Drink Tahoe Brew."
Oh yeah.
Does that belong to you, or?
It does belong to me. So I went to Lake Tahoe for a work trip, and one of the things I love to do, whether it be traveling for wrestling or for my regular job, is I love to go to breweries and restaurants and find like the most random things, whether it be a sticker or a decal. So that's kind of my thing.
That was what I wanted to ask. Is, are you a craft beer guy? Like we're craft beer guys.
I'm not a huge craft beer guy, but I definitely love like the vibe of those places when you go into them and sit down. And again, like that traveling is the best part of being a professional wrestler, in my opinion. It's not often that you're in any sort of profession where you get to go from town to town, state to state, country to country, and experience their lifestyle, their culture, their food. So I love to travel.
Do you have a favorite travel story?
I do have a favorite travel story. So
cool.
I wrestled in Memphis, Tennessee once.
One of the all-time great wrestling cities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I was so excited to wrestle in Memphis, Tennessee, and I wrestled a guy by the name of Johnny Dotson, who was signed at one point back in the early 90s at WCW, I believe. We wrestled in this sort of strip mall space, and it was packed to the gills with people. During my match, which was supposed to be like a 15-minute match, a lady had a gun in the crowd.
Well, that's a Memphis story.
Yeah.
And he was the heel, and he was drawing some heat, and they were afraid she was going to pull the gun, so he ran to the back, and our match turned from a 15-minute match to a 45-minute match, just back and forth, before they were able to calm her down and
that's awesome.
Remove the firearm.
Oh my gosh.
That's like my favorite craziest wrestling.
That's
story.
That's one of the stories that you hear like Michael PSA's telling or something like that's
and it's in Memphis of all places.
Yeah, it had to be in Memphis of all places. I do remember what I wanted to ask before, and it's one of my favorite questions to ask because it seems like everyone kind of has a little bit different of an answer, a little bit different insight into it. What is the biggest difference between wrestling for just a live crowd and wrestling for television?
It's for me, it is the hard cam, right? Mm-hmm. So I wrestled in front of hundreds, thousands of people before live audiences, and I'm always trying to make a connection with everyone. But on TV, you're trying to make a connection with everyone, but you're also your number one audience member is that hard camera, right? That's what captures everything. So that is the biggest thing for me. And difference is knowing like, hey, where am I at? Am I going to do this pose? Am I going to, look over here when typically I'd be looking at this little kid up front on the other side? Like, so.
Did you have
hard cam? Did
you have a lot of experience with? I know you didn't. You said you kind of had no experience with live television. Did you have experience with filmed wrestling before OVW at all?
No, not really. I mean, we
so big transition for you.
Promotions, yeah. I've had some promotions that do like their own YouTube series and stuff, but that's not near the production quality of an OVW, right? A weekly televised event. So yeah, OVW's been a great learning experience for me.
What is in the short time that you've been here, what's the biggest thing you've learned?
The biggest thing that I've learned at OVW is that you can, and I'm sure plenty of guys have said this, but the moves don't really matter, right? Like on the indies, on the independent wrestling scene, we get lost. Well, lots of guys get lost doing a lot of cool moves. And the one thing that I appreciate about OVW is that they appreciate storytelling. As long as we're telling a story, and that story is fleshed out and makes sense, we've grabbed the crowd, we're leading them along this journey. They buy into it. They're into it. I mean, look at last week. Haley J's match with the J-Rod.
Golly,
look at the
man.
reaction of the crowd.
What a match.
Yeah, that was a great match.
Yeah.
And I think in my small amount of time there, that was the most hyped and the most upset that I've ever seen a crowd at the end of an OVW
That's
show.
the Haley J effect right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, that's wonderful. I do have kind of on the way out here, I do have a couple of questions to kind of end where we started. You mentioned that wrestling for you was a ritual between you and your father. What was it like the first time he got to see you wrestle, or did he ever get to see you wrestle? I guess it would have been with the right question.
Away. Yeah, my father passed away before he even thought about wrestling.
Really?
So one thing that I like, so part of the reason why I'm still doing this and why for me, it's such a big deal to wrestle in front of my kids, or at least, when I first showed up at OVW, they were so excited to see me wrestle and watch it on television. And that's a big thing for me because my dad didn't get to experience that with me. So whenever I'm wrestling, I'm thinking about that. Like, my dad loved wrestling so much from the time he was a kid to the time that he passed away. So it's something that I just carry with me all the time. That's
amazing, man. And I'm sure that for you getting to wrestle in front of your children, you couldn't ask for anything more.
No, not at all. They're my son and my youngest daughter and even my oldest daughter now. They can get lost in the moments, and they, they're smartened up. They're smartened up to it, but just watching their reaction when I walk through the curtain, that's huge for me.
I can tell, man. I wish I can tell, and we are miles and miles away, separated by the internet. Anthony, on the way out here, could you plug your social media?
Yeah. So you can follow me on all social media: Facebook, X. I don't want to call it Twitter because it's not that anymore. Instagram.
It'll be that again one day.
Yeah, I know it's going to change. Elon Musk's going to change it. But it's at Anthony Toatele. Please give me a follow. Follow my journey. I love to share multiple aspects of my life, not just wrestling. But
and that's Toatele.
That is correct.
Anthony Toatele.
Yeah, good job.
The Samoan word for many. That was what I was given name by my grandmother, my Samoan grandmother. She said, "You're a lot of things, so I'm just going to call you Toatele."
Wow.
Very cool.
Man, I couldn't have asked for a better ending than that. Anthony Toatele, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us, man.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate you.
Pleasure is all ours, brother.